Just we have a new caller on today with Wendy, who's calling us from New York. So where are you again, Carly?
Newcastle, near Sydney, Australia.
There we go. So we've got New South Wales, we've got Victoria, Western Australia, and across in the States, New York. So well represented. Our international cast. Again, we would have had Coralie from New Zealand, but she can't make it today, unfortunately. So we may still yet have Yanni. I'm not quite sure if she's joining us. She's in California. All right, we will get started. So thank you all for being here. And good to see all your smiling faces. We are today finishing our review of The Infinite Game, which is Simon Sinek. And so we've been working our way through it steadily. And we're now on the last chapter, chapter 11. When I say last chapter, there is another, what is called an afterword rather than a chapter. So there's a few summarized points there as well. I don't know if you picked up on that, but so we've got Wendy and Kate haven't really been with us for most of this. Have you had, yes, Kate, sorry, Wendy, you said you haven't had a chance to read the book yet. Is that right?
No, I saw that you were doing a book. I kind of checked it out online a little bit to see what it was about and watched a little bit of a YouTube.
Yeah.
And then I said, you know, I'm just going to go in cold.
Yeah, no, that's no problem. That's what we're all about. We'll learn something from each session anyway. There's always some nuggets that come out, even from the author and from some of the participants in the discussion. So, Kate, have you had a chance to have a look at this or listen to it?
Yes, I opened and downloaded the book last night and read the first chapter, and then I've cheated and jumped to the 11th chapter. I know I'll be able to pick it all up, but basically I've been blown away, and I've got 7 minutes left on the chapter 11, and I had to stop to join this class. So, I'm spewing, but it's really intriguing, and I'm glitched. What's that word? I'm really gripped by it.
Yeah, he's a good storyteller, Simon Sinek. He always has great anecdotes. Carly, how are you going? Have you had a chance to listen to it or catch up with it at all?
Yeah, I listened. Hang on. No, I read it. I didn't listen. I read it. And then I read that next piece that follows it. But don't ask me any questions until I'm listening to you, and then it'll go, oh, yeah, that's right.
No worries. All right. And Stan, I know you've been through the whole audiobook and probably read it as well, have you? And you're muted, my friend.
No, I only listened to the audio. I didn't get a chance to read it. I was busy reading other things.
No worries. Stan likes to read about what? How many books at the same time? A whole bunch?
4 or 5.
He's multitasking. So when I say reads them at the same time, and not literally at the same time, but you know what I mean. He jumps from one to the other. So The Infinite Game. All right, that's fine. Just wanted to get an idea. So just to flick back through, I'm not going to go in depth into all the chapters. I just wanted to, I suppose, pick out a few of the key points for the benefit of those of you who haven't had a chance to read it yet. But I highly recommend reading this book. Simon Sinek's such a great storyteller, and he's so sort of passionate about what he talks about. We did review previously one of his other books, Start With Why, and he's also done another one called Leaders Eat Last. But this one, The Infinite Game, is really explaining the difference between people who, or businesses who, and also people, but people who play a finite game have sets of rules, and there's usually a winner and a loser. And whereas when you have an infinite game, it's a game that just continues on and ad infinitum, as they say. So there's no real winning. And you think about it, as he says in this book, there's no really winning the game of life. You know, you're here for the time that you're here, so it's finite in that sense, but it's infinite in terms of you can't win at life, or you can't really win at business. You can be successful depending on what your criteria are. So in business terms, what tends to happen is that people are judged by results, but results are only the product of what you do. They're not the reason for what you do. They are what happens once you've done it. So what he talks about a lot is having a cause or a worthy ideal. And if you've ever heard the Earl Nightingale recording of The Stranger's Secret, he talks about having a worthy ideal as being the thing that we're all sort of really striving towards. And if you haven't found a worthy ideal yet, don't worry, it's too late. Not too late. You can always keep fishing around and explore that and delve into it, and perhaps go back to Simon's other book, Start With Why, where he talks about that in quite a bit more depth. And then he has a companion book with that called Finding Your Why. So it actually takes you through step by step in how to uncover what's really driving you, or what you would like. And it might be something that hasn't even occurred to you yet. So it's really, a lot of the time we don't explore our own strengths and weaknesses enough. And as James Allen said, men simply do not think. And I think by men he meant people in that case. We don't set aside enough time to think and reflect on what's really important to us. So chapter 1 was, well, the beginning of the book was really all about explaining why he feels it's important for people to understand the difference between a finite sort of strategy and an infinite strategy. And it's really about how people must come before profit in his ideal world. He introduced it nicely with this comparison. Really a good way of illustrating the point was the Vietnam story with the Tet Offensive, where the Americans were fighting in Vietnam, and there was an unwritten rule that you didn't fight on this sacred holiday day, rather like in the First World War when they didn't attack on Christmas Day. Everyone sort of sang songs to each other and put the guns aside for that day and went, oh, we're not going to shoot anyone on Christmas Day. That wouldn't be very nice. And the North Vietnamese decided that they would surprise the Americans and launch the Tet Offensive to catch them unawares and, break the rules of warfare, essentially. And the Americans repelled them. And he goes into some detail about that, how the Americans really inflicted huge casualties, over 3 million people in North Vietnam, and yet still ended up losing the war. I say losing in inverted commas for want of a better word, but why was that? Why did America, why is it perceived through historical terms that Vietnam was really a loss for America? Because basically they withdrew. They were looking at it from a finite perspective, that there must be a winner and a loser, whereas the North Vietnamese were fighting a just cause. They were fighting for their own survival as they perceived it. I'm not getting into the ideologies of that, but they felt that they were fighting for their own country and for their own right to exist and so on. And so they were much more motivated. It was more personal for them. Whereas for the American public, what then started to happen is they lost the will to want to continue, because it's fighting some war that doesn't really mean anything on the other side of the world, and the original purpose of what they were trying to achieve fell by the wayside somewhat. And so this he uses as the example to say, all this begs the question, how do you win almost every battle, decimate your enemy, and still lose the war? Well, it's this difference between a finite mindset and an infinite mindset. So he then, in his first chapter, then went on to, no matter how successful we are in life, when we die, none of us will be declared the winner of life. So what's it all about, Alfie, as the song goes? The game of business has no finish line either, has no real winner and loser. I mean, you could have a company that's more successful in terms of hitting profit targets, and maybe another company might go broke. You could say, well, that one won and the other one lost. But the game of business as such is not really, you can never rest on your laurels. You can never go, that's it, we're the best. How many times do you hear slogans and advertising saying, we're the best at this, or we make the best car, or we make the best hamburger, or whatever it is, and 5 minutes later somebody else overtakes them? Because inherent in that sort of finite thinking of trying to be declaring yourself the best, you're setting yourself up for being overtaken by a competitor, because there's always going to be somebody who's going to push the boundaries or come up with a new innovation or a new idea. So you can never just sit there and think, I'm the best, that's it, we've done it now, because as they like to say, what got you here won't get you there. So things are always changing in our world, and they're changing so rapidly these days. Another one of his great examples of how to get it right was the Victorinox, the company, the Swiss company that made the Swiss Army knife. And he talks about how when September 11 occurred, it really sort of decimated their business, because the Swiss Army knife was traditionally a great gift idea. And then suddenly you couldn't take it on an aircraft. You couldn't sort of, you know, travel anywhere with it, because you were constantly being searched and going through security checks and things like that. And you, having a knife in your pocket is not really perceived as the right way to behave. So they were getting confiscated right, left and center. So it kind of destroyed their business temporarily. And they took the infinite approach. So rather than what most companies would have done is just lay off loads of employees, and we've just had a big problem with that with our airlines in Australia, where we've had the, you know, the effects of the pandemic, the global pandemic, and nobody flying anywhere, of course, during the lockdown periods. And so all the airlines laid off all their staff, took opportunity to make loads of people redundant, get rid of, cut back their workforce. And now when things have picked up again, suddenly they haven't got the staff. They can't seem to recruit staff into that industry at the moment, and they're having to cancel flights left, right and center, and there's chaos at the airports and so on, because they took a sort of more finite approach. With the Swiss Army company, they decided that they weren't going to lay off staff. They found ways of keeping them all employed, and they reinvented themselves. So they came up with different concepts, and it went on to say in the book here, today Swiss Army knives account for only 35% of total revenue, but sales of travel gear, watches and fragrances have helped Victorinox nearly double its revenues compared to the days before September 11. It is not a stable company, it is a resilient one. So he talks about this concept of being resilient, being willing to reinvent yourself. So I'm just flicking through fast here and trying to pick out some of the key points. So we come to what we're going to talk about today is chapter 11. We'll get to that in a few minutes. So lead with an infinite mindset. And he talks about any leader who wants to adopt an infinite mindset must follow 5 essential practices. So one is advance a just cause. And he goes on in the next chapter to explain what he really means by a just cause. Build trusting teams. Study your worthy rivals. So you do want competition in business. You do want people who are going to challenge you, and not just business, in life in general, and sporting events and all sorts. You're not going to improve if you haven't got someone to play against who's going to match you. And you know, I think in my own example, I play beach volleyball a couple of times a week, and there's nothing worse than you play against a team who either you thrash them or they thrash you. It makes it no fun. It's not a contest. You'd much rather have a game where there's long rallies and you really have to fight for every point. And you feel like if you do win it, you feel like you've earned it. There's no fun just destroying another team and, you know, they can't get the ball back. And you're just like, well, what's the point of this? Anyone relate to that? Yeah. So prepare for existential flexibility. So like with the Swiss Army knife company, if your existence is at threat, you've got to be flexible. You've got to be willing to reinvent yourselves, and in your life too. If things go pear-shaped, and Kate was just describing a bit of that recently, you know, you reinvent yourself and you figure out, well, what's really important to me and what do I need to do next, and maybe go on a different course. Demonstrate the courage to lead is the 5th point. So which we'll be talking about leadership today in the chapter 11. So a just cause. If you haven't read this, there's a very good story with a guy called Nikolai Vavilov in Russia in the Second World War, around that time, who was working on seed collection And the concept, or the worthy cause, was that no one should have to go hungry, and that every family should be able to feed their children. And so they were looking, this was the early research days of what they've now continued on to do research into how to create super crops and that kind of thing, where they can make the crops grow more efficiently, faster, yield more of what they want. So there's quite a lot of scientific research gone into it. Well, he was one of the early researchers of this, and had amassed a big collection of seeds. And Hitler knew where it was. Knew of its existence, but didn't know where it was. So when the city was surrounded and they were literally being starved, Vavilov had already been captured and tortured, and he wouldn't give up the location of where it was. His followers also stood guard over this seed collection, and even when they were starving and would have probably gladly eaten that seed collection just to survive, they refused to do it. They were so committed to the cause that they would rather starve to death than give up the cause. And so the seed collection survived and formed the basis of a lot of the research that continued on in subsequent decades. Oh no, Kate's phone battery is flat. Hopefully you can find a charger and hook back in. All right. So that's pretty powerful when people are actually even willing to give up their life for a worthwhile cause. So this just leapt out at me. I hadn't highlighted this, but actually it just caught my eye when I was just flicking through here. I'll highlight it now. Winning provides a temporary thrill of victory, an intense but fleeting boost to our self-confidence. None of us is able to hold on to the incredible feeling of accomplishment for that target we hit, promotion we earned, or tournament we won a year ago. Isn't that true? Those feelings have passed. To get that feeling again, we need to try to win again. So that's that sort of finite mindset that's all about getting that result and that boost of dopamine, I guess, probably. However, when there is a just cause, a reason to come to work that is bigger than any particular win, our days take on more meaning and feel more fulfilling. Feelings that carry on week after week, month after month, year after year. In an organization that is only driven by the finite, we may like our jobs some days, but we will likely never love our jobs. If we work for an organization with a just cause, we may like our jobs some days, but we will always love our jobs. As with our kids, we may like them some days and not others, but we love them every day. It's a great point, isn't it? For those of us who've had kids, I think we've all had kids, haven't we? I don't know, actually. Wendy, have you got children or had children? So yes, I think we can all relate to that. There's days when you don't particularly like them all that much, but you never stop loving them. So that's a pretty worthy cause, isn't it? Bringing up children. So to define that, a just cause must be for something. It must be inclusive. In other words, open to people who would like to contribute. It must be service oriented, which is for the primary benefit of others. Resilient, so able to endure political, technological, and cultural change. And idealistic, so big, bold, and this is interesting, ultimately unachievable. So if you think about something, a major one that springs to mind, and he brings it up at some point in the book, was Dr. Martin Luther King, you know, the I Have a Dream speech. Has his dream been fulfilled? Are we living in a world now where everyone is equal and where people of every race, color, and creed can mix together and play together and not fall out? No, sadly we aren't. I don't think probably that humanity ever will. History has taught us that anyway. And yet it is a noble dream, and it's something that we can all aspire to and try to influence other people to live up to. It reminds me of that story of the starfish, you know, the father and little daughter walking along the beach, and there's all these starfish lying on the beach, and they're basically going to dry up and die in the sun because they're out of the water. And the father picks one up and throws it back into the water. And the little girl's like, Dad, why did you do that? And he said, well, I just wanted to save that starfish. If it's left on the beach, it's going to dry up in the sun and it's going to die. And she said, but there's hundreds of them all over the beach. You can't save them all. How can you make a difference? And he said, well, it sure made a difference to that one, didn't it? So we can start with one starfish or one person at a time, and we can gradually influence at least our little part of the world wherever we are. Right. I'm conscious of time, so I'm just trying to sort of speed through. You're getting a crash course of the book here if you haven't read it yet, and I do recommend going back and reading it in detail. The reason the service orientation is so important in the infinite game is because it builds a loyal base of employees and customers and investors who will stick with the organization through thick and thin. So rather like the guys who wouldn't give up the seed collection, there's been plenty of examples in history of companies that are struggling, and yet if they've built the sort of culture where everyone feels included and feels part of a cause, they'll even sometimes take, unpaid leave or voluntary cuts in pay or anything they have to do to help out just to keep the company afloat, probably because they love what they do, love the cause, and they'll put the company ahead of themselves just to keep it going. So investors might say, well, we won't take any dividends or returns, we'll just wait until the company's back on track again. So to keep us in the infinite game, our cause must be durable, resilient, and timeless. And also he talks about writing it down. If you can define a cause that really means something to you, have it written down, because that sort of achieves a couple of things. It locks it in. It means you've got something to refer back to. And also, if you ever have to, like for a company, for instance, if you ever have to hand the reins over to somebody else, it's clear what the meaning is, why this organization exists and what you're trying to achieve. So otherwise it can be lost in the translation, so to speak. The Chinese whispers game, where the message gets passed on and doesn't get passed on very well, and ends up being completely distorted by, if you whisper something to one person and it goes around the room, by the time it gets to the person at the end of the room, it's a totally different message. Try that one at home, it's fun. So then he talks about cause and no cause. It really details what is a cause. Better in the infinite game is better than best. So really, it's that concept of, as Tony Robbins calls it, constant, never-ending improvement, or what the Japanese call kaizen, the concept of working on yourself continuously, working on your own business, working on yourself, so that you're better than you were yesterday, rather than trying to compare yourself with somebody else. Please, Kate, jump in.
I wrote some pointers down, if I could share them.
Sure.
On chapter 11.
Oh yeah, okay. We haven't got to chapter 11 yet, but we can.
Oh, okay, sorry. I'll wait.
No, that's all right. All right. Well, I'm just sort of recapping a few of the key points from the earlier chapters, just to bring everyone sort of up to speed, and then we'll go in depth into chapter 11. So, an infinite perspective on service looks different to the perspective of making money to do good. He says the order of the information matters. It's do good, making money. So when people talk about their cause, usually the thing that's the most important is the first thing they say. So if you listen out for that, if you hear a CEO or a company leader saying, well, we're in business to make money and achieve our profit results, give a return for our investors, and obviously we're going to look after our staff, and we'll try and do the best that we can for our customers. The order of information is all wrong there, isn't it? It's all about the making the money first, and that's really the betrayal of what's really important to them is the order of the information. So if it wasn't, if it was the other way around, it sounds completely different. And he does give that example with in the next chapter, we're going to chapter 4, Keeper of the Cause. Sam Walton, who founded Walmart stores, had a great sort of vision for the company when he first started. We'll give the world an opportunity to save, to see what it's like to save and have a better life. If we work together, we'll lower the cost of living for everyone. So it's quite a noble sort of ambition with Sam Walton and the Walmart stores when they were founded. And for a while there, they became the most profitable retail company in the world. And then, sadly, he passed on, and it wasn't really locked in, this worthy cause that he had. And instead, the next CEO that took over, Mike Duke, the original vision was now little more than marketing slogans and hollow words written on the office walls. The company had become obsessed with profit, growth, and dominance at the expense of the very cause that drove their success in the first place. So, as he says in this book, where people used to campaign to have a Walmart store in their community, suddenly after a few years of putting profit first and people second, and having lawsuits for unfair dismissals and poor workplace relations and things like that, it actually got to the point where the communities were petitioning to not have a Walmart store in their community. So now then the CEO changed again, and then they went back to more of their original vision and starting to restore their good name and restoring their position in the marketplace again. But for a while there, they went really well off track. But he says words matter. They give direction and meaning to things. Does business have a responsibility? Yes, it does. So he talks about Adam Smith, the 18th century Scottish philosopher and economist, who is accepted as the father of economics and modern capitalism. So in our capitalist world, he really says that, in a nutshell, Smith accepted that it was human nature for people to act to advance their own interests. He called our propensity for self-interest the invisible hand, and gives lots of examples of that. But in theory, really, we should be about contribution. How are our actions improving other people's lives, or affecting or positively influencing other people's lives, or making a difference to their life, offering better products or services or better ways of doing things. And he really takes on this point that some people might say that the purpose of a company is that if you say that it's not just to make money but to pursue a just cause, that could be considered naive and anti-capitalist. But he actually goes on to say that really companies exist to advance something, technology, quality of life, or anything else with the potential to ease or enhance our lives in some way, shape, or form. So it's quite a noble kind of concept, and that the people who don't get it tend not to last, because if they're focused on profit first and people second, it really doesn't work in the long term. It's a finite game, not an infinite game. We'll want to like our work and feel that our lives have meaning, and we'll want to feel part of something bigger than ourselves. As I always say to my staff, that none of them come into work thinking, what can I stuff up today? You might wonder sometimes, but no, people don't. Most of us, we want to go to work and feel like when we come home, that we've done a good job that day, don't we? We hope that we can feel like we've made a difference and we've done the best that we can. All right. So the responsibility of business, he says, is to advance a purpose and to protect people. No one should be really going to work worried about whether they're going to get laid off because the company's not making enough profit, some arbitrary figure that they've got to hit on the balance sheet, profit and loss target. Yes, of course, business has to make a profit, otherwise it won't be in existence tomorrow. But is it just the profit? Is that the only thing? He talks about the American Foundation, the declaration being to advance life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. and then compares that with some of the other ideologies around the world, and that everyone really kind of they have their own version of it. It might sound different to us, but he talks about even the USSR being founded on 3 promises or rights. That the unification of the Soviet Republic into one union state capable of ensuring both external security and internal economic prosperity, and the freedom of national development of peoples. In other words, a nation committed to protect its people, offer an opportunity of economic gain, and advance the ideology of communism. A similar trifecta showed up again during the Vietnam War, when General Giap rallied the North Vietnamese to join the People's War, the promise of physical safety, economic advancement, and the opportunity to advance an ideology. So we all have our own version of the same game, in a sense. It might seem alien to us, and yet really those 3 ingredients are all there in each one. So will and resources, he talks about really how, this is now moving through chapter 6, how do we create an environment where people can work to their natural best? True leaders will work to create these environments when we train them how to prioritize their people over the results. So in the infinite game, if you look after the people first, people are your greatest asset in any organization. And if you look after them, they'll look after you. Hopefully, anyway. If you treat people right, it's a karma thing, isn't it? You really tend to get that back, and people will do their best for you. They'll come up with ideas. They'll want to contribute. They'll want to see the company doing better, because then, and if you can get people in that sort of mindset, then we all know that if the company's making more money, well, at least you'd feel that then there's a chance I can get higher wages, or I can get bonuses because I'm helping contribute to the company doing better. But if the company's struggling, how are they going to pay me more money? They can't afford to. So it really does play back into a karmic sort of thing, where we get back based on what we put out or what we contribute. So infinite-minded leaders work hard to look beyond the financial pressures of the current day and put people before profit as often as possible. All right. Yes, they understand that the will of their people is the thing that drives discretionary effort, as well as problem-solving, imagination, and teamwork, all things essential for surviving and thriving in the future. And when companies make their people feel like they matter, the people come together in a way that money simply cannot buy. It buys, or that treatment of people buys true will. Remember Churchill in the war talking about the will, the British will of the British people. A very great speaker. If you ever listen to any of Churchill's speeches, talking about fighting the Iron Curtain that's going to descend upon us, and all the dark veil of the Iron Curtain, or something like that. So trusting teams, chapter 7, more about that, feeling the trust is the stacking and layering of small moments and reciprocal vulnerability over time, which was a Brene Brown quote. Trust and vulnerability grow together, and to betray one is to destroy both. And we should work towards acting and treating each other with respect, courtesy, and thoughtfulness. Simon does a lot of work with the US military, in particular the Navy SEALs he's done work with, and he talks about how they would rather have somebody that they can trust than someone who's necessarily the best at something. They would rather have the person who's not going to leave the other team member behind, or is not going to give up on the objective. They'd rather have someone with character than and someone they can trust to be on the team, than someone who might be technically brilliant or individually very talented, but doesn't care enough about the rest of the team. If they're all out about themselves, then it's not the kind of person that they're looking for. And in a corporate world, he talks about how when you've got finite leaders, can lead to behaviors that undermine trust, things like hoarding information instead of sharing it, stealing credit instead of giving it, manipulating younger team members, and throwing others under the bus to avoid personal accountability. Ever come across a boss like that? I certainly have. Someone who took the credit for everything, and then anything that went wrong, he managed to blame it on somebody else, so that he always came out looking good, and amazingly kept rising through the ranks of the particular retail organization I used to work with a long time ago in another lifetime. So I'm speeding through now because I'm very aware of time. So these things all build what we call company culture. So the things of how people feel engaged, whether they feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves, whether they feel there's trust there, that they can relate to the values of the company. And that's how you build trusting teams. The ability to succeed is not what makes someone a leader. Exhibiting the qualities of leadership is what makes someone an effective leader. Qualities like honesty, integrity, courage, resilience, perseverance, judgment, and decisiveness, as the Marines have learned after years of trial and error, are more likely to engender the kind of trust and cooperation that over the course of time increase the likelihood that a team will succeed more often than it fails. Chapter 80 went on to talk about ethical fading. So that's the kind of concept where if you do something like tell a white lie, for example, or you do something that you know is not quite right, but you know everyone else is doing it, so yeah, I guess we can sort of tolerate that, you know. So ethical fading is a condition in a culture that allows people to act in unethical ways in order to advance their own interests, often at the expense of others, while falsely believing that they have not compromised their own moral principles. Ethical fading often starts with small, seemingly innocuous transgressions that, when left unchecked, continue to grow and compound. You know, stealing the pen from work, or if it starts with something innocuous and you think, oh, I'm an honest person, it's only a pen. You don't then think, well, actually, I'm a thief because I just took that pen. Or if you tell a lie to someone, you're like, your friends invite you to something and then you come up with an excuse because you don't really want to go. But it's only a white lie. I mean, you're protecting their feelings because you don't want to tell them that I just don't want to go. So, you know, these sort of moral slips over time can turn into the new norm if you allow it to. And we have Yanni joining us as well from California, I'm presuming. Or no, you might even be in Mexico at the moment. She was visiting family, I believe. So, all right. We are blessed and cursed with our ability for rational thought as human beings. And there's that old saying, if you rationalize, you're actually telling yourself rational lies, that you are maybe saying, well, people won't notice, and besides they can afford it anyway, and blah, blah, blah. We come up with these justifications or excuses for why what we know is not really right is actually kind of acceptable. All of a sudden it's okay. So self-deception, he elaborates on that. Right. Conscious of time, I'm just speeding through a little bit faster here. So chapter 9 was a worthy rival. So we're talking about the concept, as we mentioned earlier, about it's important to have a rival who challenges us to become better. Like I said, it's no fun winning the game and thrashing the opposition. You don't really, your standard starts to drop because you almost feel guilty that you're beating them so easily. Then it means you're playing worse than you would be if you were playing someone who's on a par with you. They're going to make you work for every point. Then they become a worthy rival. So he gave this great example about Apple. He loves working with Apple, and how when IBM went into the personal computer space eventually, after their CEO saying that no one would ever want a computer in their home. Well, that was wrong, wasn't it? That Apple actually put out an advert welcoming them into the marketplace, and because they knew that having competition was going to actually drive them to be better. And so they took that infinite mindset that there's always going to be competition. There's always going to be a rival. But what you want is someone who is not just going to destroy you or you destroy them. You want someone who's going to challenge you to have to be better. So a worthy rival forces us or inspires us, actually inspires us rather than forces us, but inspires us to take on an attitude of improvement. It is the focus on process and constant improvement that helps reveal new skills and boost resilience. So yeah, I always love Simon's anecdotes, and it's worth reading the book if you haven't yet, just for these little stories of how he illustrates his points and how one company thinks they've got it all and they think they're the best, and then they rest on their laurels and then somebody else catches up. So chapter 10 was about existential flexibility, and he talked about how Walt Disney had established the Disney world. He'd established, he'd been a pioneer and a leader in that area, where, for instance, he'd made Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. He set out to make an animated film that was a believable substitute for reality. The evolution of Disney's work was quite incredible. It was nothing the world had ever seen before. And it wasn't the result of experimentation for the sake of experimentation, nor was it driven by a desire to get rich or become famous. With each step, Disney was advancing his just cause, inviting audiences to leave the stresses and strains of life behind and enter into a more idyllic world of his creation. So that was his worthy cause. And then when he found that the company was not really doing that, or he was limited, he decided to risk everything and sold off his shares in Disney and started a whole new company with the objective of building Disneyland, because he wanted that to be an infinite game where they could continue improving all the time. He felt that with the movies, once you watch the movie, that's it. It's finite. It's a piece of work that's sort of complete. You might go back and watch it again, maybe in a few years or something. But whereas the Disneyland theme parks were constantly able to add new things, new attractions, new ways of doing things, new characters, and you could immerse yourself in that world and be part of it. And so that was really fulfilling his noble cause there, which was people leaving the stresses and strains of life behind and really, relaxing and enjoying themselves. So that was a good example of flexing, of doing something differently, being willing to risk things. Talks again about Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, and how their whole objective was to challenge the status quo. That was their big vision, was to bring the personal computer as the perfect tool for individuals to challenge the status quo, and that they could do the kind of stuff that we now see today, where people are working on the road. People have got mobile laptops and devices and can work anywhere. We're all on this call because of that kind of thing, that kind of evolution of being able to communicate around the world, of being able to use our devices to work from, and work from home or work from a caravan park or anywhere we happen to be that there's internet access. And he gave the example, the opposite side of the coin. Kodak, a great sad story of how Kodak were the pioneers who really brought photography to the common man, where previously it had been the domain of professional photographers, and it was a complex business. And then the world went digital, and Kodak didn't keep up with the times. Which brings us to chapter 11, what we're supposed to be here to talk about today. Sorry, I only went on that lengthy review because I knew that a lot of people on the call hadn't had a chance to read the book. So in chapter 11, The Courage to Lead, he starts with a company called CVS Caremark, and that they had a just cause, helping people on their path to better health. So in light of that, they made a decision in 2014 that they would stop selling any tobacco-related products in all of their 2,800 stores. When you think about that, that is a lot. That's going to have a huge impact. It was a decision that would cost the company $2 billion per year in lost revenue. It was a decision they chose to make, even though there was no competitive pressure to do so. So why would they do a thing like that? Because they realized that selling tobacco products was not in keeping with their just cause, which was helping people on their path to better health. Interestingly, the turnaround from that was that they ended up growing their business. It took a hit initially, obviously, but they then found that in a lot of cases, people in the areas where they had refused to sell tobacco, the number of nicotine patches sold increased by 4% in the period immediately after they stopped selling cigarettes, indicating that CVS's decision actually encouraged smokers to quit. When a company with the stated cause of helping people live healthier lives made a courageous decision to deliver on that purpose, not only did it help make Americans a little healthier, but it also had a positive impact on overall sales at their pharmacies. His golden circle story from earlier in the book and from his TED Talks was that people don't buy what you're selling, they buy what you believe. And so it's not what you're doing, it's why you're doing it is the thing that they relate to. And you think about it in sales, we tend to buy the salesperson first. If we like the salesperson that's presenting the product to us, we're going to choose to buy from the salesperson that we know, like, and trust, rather than the person that we don't. Or we might know them, but we don't necessarily trust them. We're not going to buy from them. We're going to buy from the one we trust. And what we trust is really people who have values and sort of live by them. All right. When we are pressured to do things that violate that ethical code, it takes the courage to lead, to speak up, to make those who would pressure us to do otherwise aware of the situation that they are creating. It takes the courage to lead, to ignore the pressure of outside parties who are not invested in or believers in our just cause. So how do we find the courage to change our mindset? Well, he says, 1, we can wait for a life-altering experience that shakes us to our core and challenges the way we see the world. Or 2, we can find a just cause that inspires us. We can surround ourselves with others with whom we share a common cause, people we trust and who trust us. We can identify a rival worthy of comparison that will push us to constantly improve, and remind ourselves that we are more committed to the cause than to any particular path or strategy that we happen to be following right now. Anyone want to add anything to that? I've done most of the talking this morning. Wendy, you've just listened to chapter 11, haven't you? Did you have a chance? A little bit.
I listened to some of it. I didn't get all the way through, but I do really understand that courageousness. Yep. And I think that the reason why I ended up being an entrepreneur is I already had kind of a leadership mentality. And in my family, they used to play a game called Don't Tell Your Mom, Don't Tell Your Grandpa. And I don't know if anybody ever had that. And I just never felt comfortable with it because I didn't lie well. Was a shortcoming. And so I got to a point when I got about 13 or 14 years old, and my mom started to tell me something that I couldn't tell my grandfather. And I said, no, just don't tell me. And I really kind of have that kind of beingness about me and in my family. If family can't know, if it's a secret, don't tell me. Now, I'm not talking about life things. I'm talking about, like, you know, things that would be a lie to a family. And so I kind of followed that through my life, is if you're going to tell me a secret that somebody should know and then tell me not to tell them, don't tell me.
Yep.
And like I said, that was how I can relate to that. And I do operate my business in that same way. I'm very truthful to my customers. I tell them what I can and cannot do, and I follow through. And if I miss a step or I do an error, I own up to it.
Very good. Yeah, that's an investment. When you're doing what you know is the right thing, it's an investment in the long-term future. You're playing the infinite game. You know that if you do the right thing, it comes back to you. It might not straight away. You might sacrifice something short term, but you haven't betrayed your morals or your ethics or your beliefs to do so. So he talks about the fact that really when you do that, you buy it. Like if you cut costs, for instance, sorry, if you cut the prices, or you do those sort of promotional deals where, 2 for 1, really you're buying the business off people, and you might be sort of temporarily in a way sacrificing your ideals or your cause and that's really playing the finite game. That's about just trying to hit those profit targets or get those figures on the board. But if you treat the customers right, if you behave consistently with your ethics and with your values, then over the long term you will win. And that's win in the sense of you will still exist and constantly still be improving and growing, not necessarily growing in financial numbers, but growing in terms of how you operate and how you see the world and how the world perceives you. Carly, did you want to add something to it?
No, I'm just writing notes on this piece, so no, I'm fine.
Okay. We've got Yanni, who's just joined us and had been crazily busy at work. Are you able to speak, Yanni?
Yes. I didn't get to finish the book, but in overall what I understood with this book, it's kind of, I'm learning to play chess, me and my baby. So it's kind of looking on, your moves ahead of time where you can last longer in the game, and instead of, I used to think of having immediate gratification. I used to not have the patience to look at the big picture, the long term. And as I'm reading books and now working with my friends to create a business and stuff, and oh my God, this book allowed me to have that perspective of the moves you make today that can last you, in the infinite game, that it's not just you, it's in overall helping others. And like the chess game, the moves you make in order for you to stay longer, kind of in that aspect, I kind of took it that way.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, sometimes it's easy. Well, he says it's easier to sometimes give in to that sort of finite mindset of solving the problem today, but not thinking about the long-term solution or the long-term benefits. And this is a challenge as leaders that we face quite often, is facing our own finite thinking. It's kind of been embedded into us. The world that's been set up around us is to have a winner and a loser. If you've got a winner, you must by default have a loser as well, or the person who's come second or third or whatever. Whereas if you look at it more in terms of participating and improving, that's probably more important than winning as such, because winning is a finite thing that's temporary. It's only ever temporary.
And I love it that I have friends that actually are starting with business, and I'm just asking questions. I'm also doing this accelerate your mind program, you know, about asking questions, open-ended questions. And when I ask people, they're like, oh, but this competitor does this competitor does that. And with this book, I'm like, okay, that's who they are, but what do you want to do? Why you're doing it? What's a big goal on you starting this business? And that kind of gets them thinking, like, and I see that they haven't even thought of that. So it just, I love it that I'm able to implement that with my friends. They're like, wait, what do you mean? And I'm also recommending books that we read here, you know, and I was like, dude, I'm like, this one has helped me out to think more, not on the what and the how, but the why we do things, and not just the business, but also in personal life. But in order for you to have, you know, you want to go big, right? Then you gotta start with why you're doing this. You know, is it just for you? Is it for the money, for a bigger purpose? I'm like, do you want your company to thrive in the long term or just the short term? And that kind of gets them thinking. So I love that. and when I explain it, when I ask the question, it allows me to think of my why as well.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And that's good that you've been able to make that connection with your personal life or your personal challenges aside from just the workplace situation. It's really a philosophy for the whole of your life, and relationships and parenting and all sorts of things. So Carly, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I was reflecting on the infinite game. Basically talks about from birth, where we always have two choices. And so basically the smallest thing is the infinite game. The smallest, simplest daily choice is your infinite game. Yes, even that is your just cause. Even if it's feeding the kids or washing up, or in business, just putting an intention for the day. If that intention is in an infinite choice, in an infinite realm, in an infinite perspective, there's our infinite game, or in the simplest things. Yeah,
very good. I think that one of the key points that in the book, and I didn't mention it on the way through there, but was the concept of the moonshot. The finite game, if you like, was to get the first man on the moon, but that was part of an infinite game, which was for mankind to continue exploring the universe and beyond into infinity. But the moonshot was sort of perceived as the big game, but it was really just a finite game. It was just a temporary thing, because once you've achieved that, what comes next? So it's infinite. We have an infinite universe, or we're told that we do, an infinite number of universes out there. And space itself is infinite, so we could carry on exploring forever and ever. Whereas getting to the moon was just a goal. It was a game that was part of a bigger game. So that sort of puts it in context. Stan, did you have anything you wanted to add? Are you able to speak and contribute anything?
Oh, I turned my camera off while the boys were running around, and then I forgot all about it. No, not really. It was yeah, kind of a good way of thinking about that kind of Japanese thing, you know, like when you have like 100-year plan sort of thing, not just, hey, we've got a plan for the year, although you need kind of one of those. You kind of need the longer term kind of vision for the people.
Yeah, it reminds me of that concept of planting a tree that you'll never get to sit under the shade of that tree. It's going to continue to grow long after you've gone, and somebody else, some future generation, will get the benefit of that. That's kind of more playing the infinite game, isn't it?
Yep.
Has anyone else got any other what were your key takeaways, do you think, from this book overall? Anyone got anything to share?
Good question. Yeah, probably looking at that longer term vision, and I suppose the first one would be having the I can't remember what you called it, the cause for a bigger purpose.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of our biggest challenges, isn't it? Is to really articulate that cause, to really find it, distill it down, and express it somehow. With some industries or some particular occupations, it's far more obvious and easy to find, but in others, it might be you have to really dig deep to find out what is really my why, my just cause. Anyone else got anything else they want to add?
Yeah, I have my own business and we do direct mail, and it's not easy. But somebody had asked me, well, what is it about being in business that, why do you do that? Because you could do anything. And I said, it didn't really matter what I was doing. I had a sense of satisfaction at the end of the day that I did something good, because I got the jobs done for my customers. I made the deadlines. We're really good at what we do, so I have a sense of satisfaction there. And no, it's not stuffing envelopes that's the thing that's driving me. It's the final product that at the end of the day, we did our best and our customers were happy, and maybe even went a little further and gave them more than what they just expected. And I think that's why my husband and I are in business. It's not just to do that. Well, it also had a secondary. We wanted to work together. So it fulfilled that need too, because we could do it together. And my family works with us, and we always wanted our family to be with us. So it did have like a second, as a higher cause for the family, but in the same sense, it fulfills a need to make people feel good that I care. People call me on my cell phone at 8 o'clock at night, they need help, and I'll help them. And I'm there for them. And that's what I like about being in business, is that people can count on me, and I count on them too. We have really good relationship.
That's great, Wendy. I like that. I think you've sort of nailed it in a sense that we all have this challenge with business, that it's combining what is pragmatic with what is idealistic. We have obviously always got pragmatic considerations. We have to earn an income, we have to pay the bills, we have to achieve this, that, and the other. We're good at this rather than we're not so good at that. So all those things come to the decisions of why we do what we do rather than something else. But then there's a pragmatic approach there, but there's also that idealistic notion that Simon's touching on in this, of having a deeper cause. And I love that you've identified that there with the family as is a key part. I know I have a cleaning business, and I love the fact that my daughter is involved in helping me to run it, doing some of the administration work with it, and doing some of the management stuff, helping me, which I feel is helping her develop as well. And these are the sort of things. There can be many different reasons why you're in business, why you've chosen that particular type of business, or why you've chosen that particular market within that industry. And a lot of those reasons are simply pragmatic choices, yet there is underlying philosophical idealism behind it as well.
Yeah, actually I had a cleaning business too with my husband, and it was very successful, but it didn't fulfill being able to be with my family, like having children and raising them and having them with me. And the people who were working for me, I gave it away. I just handed it to them. I said, you can have these accounts. I asked them for nothing. I went with them. I showed them how to get around. And then I started my next business because I was having a baby.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you know, you have to consider what's important to you in life.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Carly's just put in the chat box that she has to leave us, and thanks for your contribution there. Thank you, all of you. Wendy, that was great to have you on the call today. We're at time. Stan, Yanni, all great to have all of you, and Kate, who had to leave a little bit earlier because she had a visitor. Thank you all for your contribution. What I'm just considering is that next week we'll go on to a book by Brendan Burchard called The Motivation Manifesto. So we will start with that one. We've now sort of come to the end of Simon Sinek's Infinite Game, or have we? Because it's infinite. We can go back and review it. We can keep on working on the lessons that are inherent in it. But let's start next week on Brendan Burchard's book, if you can get hold of a copy of that, The Motivation Manifesto, 9 Declarations to Claim Your Personal Power. I think you're going to like this one. And if we can get through, probably, I think section 1 would be achievable if you can get hold of the book and get through it this week. Section 1 covers 3 chapters on freedom, on fear, and on motivation. So it's really introducing the concepts of the book.
Are you going to put that in the Facebook so we can
Yes,
find it?
and I will do that, so you can find it. And I think you're going to like this one as well. I've only ever picked books that I've read and that have inspired me, and I'm going back through them and picking out things that maybe I missed first time around, or just looking at the ways that we can share our anecdotes and how it relates to our lives, and we'll add value to each other by doing this exercise. So as I've called it, creating your ideal life is the overall sort of vision, and distilling wisdom from books is what we're trying to achieve here. Okay, so thank you everyone for coming along today and contributing, and it's great to see you all, and we will be back same time next week, starting on the Motivation Manifesto. Thanks guys. Bye for today.